Good morning, people. Good morning. So, I watched a very interesting video on the new marijuana laws in New York a couple weeks ago, and I wanted to share that with you. It was made by the Legal Action Center out in New York, and they did this presentation on YouTube, so you can look them up. I'll have the link probably in the description or whatever it is. Um, but yeah, this it was a pretty like thorough presentation, so I definitely recommend going and watching that video and giving them the likes and giving them a comment on the video. I'm sure they would definitely appreciate that, and it'll help get the word out because I think this is very important. I think a lot of people misunderstand um, the law when it comes to marijuana and now being legal in New York to a certain extent. But surprise, surprise, there's still, criminal penalties for marijuana here. So I think until we get federal reform, that's not going to change. And even then, there's, criminal penalties for landlords. So there it makes sense that there would still be criminal penalties for violating licensing laws and whatnot. But you know my spiel. Even though I'm an attorney, this video is not meant to be legal advice. If you're dealing with a legal issue, please go consult an attorney. Pay for consultations. Get 2 or 3 attorneys' advice, and make sure they're competent and they're admitted in the jurisdiction that you're dealing with, and they have experience working on the issues that you're dealing with. That's all very important. So, that said, let's get into this. So this is the Legal Action Center in New York. Great organization. One of the things that they do is help people with conviction or arrest records, and um, basically applying to seal, or maybe even they'll have some other options for you. But if you're dealing with something like that, definitely contact them if you're in New York. They seem like a great organization. Um, but they went through these like hypotheticals, um, and basically highlighting some of the parts of the law. So you're allowed to possess uh, 3 ounces of cannabis if you're over 21. So this is even like you don't even have to be a resident of the state, I don't believe. Uh, so if you're just 21 in New York, you can have 3 ounces of cannabis. You could transfer those amounts to someone 21 or older without payment. So you're not allowed to sell, but you can gift or give marijuana. And you're allowed to use or smoke and ingest, and this is with limitations. So pay attention to that. One of the big limitations is, it's still illegal federally, which is ridiculous, and hopefully we have some reform coming up. I know they just passed the MORE Act in the House, but fingers crossed it'll get through the Senate. I don't think it's very likely, but they're paying attention to it. We got midterm elections coming up. I think, even though at the last hearing that I saw, the Republicans jumping up and down saying we should be worried about gas prices, not this. But I think this is a little bit more important than gas prices. We have people in jail for non-violent marijuana offenses, and it's just kind of ridiculous. But on that note, immigration. If you have an immigration issue, definitely speak to an immigration lawyer. If you're in New York, I think they're recommending the Immigrant Defense Project. Um, but yeah, consult somebody because you may still have issues um, federally. Um so they talked about smoking in your apartment if you're in New York, and I think that all depends. I did a case. I did a trial in the housing court where a landlord was trying to throw out a tenant because they were alleging nuisance, saying that this person's a nuisance. Everyone's complaining about the smell of marijuana emanating from this person's apartment, and that's a nuisance. Um, they refused to settle or deal with us, so we ended up going to trial on that, and it was a fun trial. You probably hear me mention in other videos about there was this uh, woman that interrupted the trial to yell at one of the landlord's managers for how ridiculous they were about marijuana. But that said, we ended up winning that case, but it was based on like even if it was like, and I think smoking cigarettes is way worse. This was a like you were allowed to smoke cigarettes and everything else in that apartment. It was in Manhattan, in the Upper East Side, well, Spanish Harlem. But they basically uh, the I found some case law about you know with the cigarettes that they failed to prove that that was a nuisance, and one of the reasons why is they didn't gather enough evidence. They had to get air samples and things like that. But we also um, you know showed during the hearing or trial that the smell of marijuana wasn't exclusive to that one floor, and that it wasn't that prevalent. So we were able to avoid uh, the tenant being kicked out, and that's like the only housing trial I've ever done. So don't ask me about housing stuff. Um, so public housing, it's some of us that have lived in public housing know that there's plenty of people smoking plenty of marijuana inside their apartments, or in the stairways, or all over the place. So, but technically not allowed. It's supposed to be a smoke-free NYCHA. They instituted that I think a couple years ago. Um, so now, yeah, not allowed to smoke. Uh, so they might try to throw you out, and you don't want to lose that benefit. You know. So that's something to think about if you're in housing. And this one was a big one. So you're not allowed to smoke in a car while you're on the roads or anything I think public. If you're on private property, like if you're in your garage and you decide to smoke in your garage while you're in the car, which I hope you don't have the car on because you can kill yourself doing that. You may be okay, or that may be an okay. No, let me not go there. But yeah, that might be okay, but not on a public street. So even if you're parked on a public street, you shouldn't be smoking inside your car. Get out the car, smoke outside. Um, there's still so this was a big issue, and I know there was a case out in Philly that came out that they used the smell of marijuana and they searched as probable cause, even though there was a medical card holder in the car, um, who said that he had used marijuana. Um, they tried to use that as probable cause, and well, actually, they did use it as probable cause, and they found some unlicensed guns and some other things, uh, maybe an excess amount of marijuana. Um, I can't remember exactly, but that got thrown out completely because they weren't able to use because he could smell like marijuana and everything like that. They had no probable cause based on that to search. So they're saying now that police are allowed to use the smell of burnt cannabis as a legitimate reason to investigate whether a person is operating a vehicle while impaired, but the smell does not give them probable cause to search areas of the vehicle not readily accessible to the driver. So they still have the ability to search in that driver zone because that's a safety issue. Um, if the driver can reach for something that can hurt them, then they should be able to check that out is the basic thesis of that. But yeah, so now they're putting it in the penal law that you can give them a sobriety test or whatever, but that doesn't give you an excuse to search their vehicle. So that's interesting. You're not allowed to smoke at your job. So if you're in the office, you shouldn't be smoking. Um, Bars and restaurants, even at outdoor dining, you're not allowed to be smoking. And I think that is 100% stigma related. People are just like don't want to smell marijuana because they're offended by it. And oh my god, people are so obnoxious. Like one time I was at a hotel, and I'm a medical marijuana user, and I got a hotel with a huge terrace so that I can go out and smoke. And you were allowed to smoke on the terrace. Um, and there was a guy like two balconies above me, and he came out, and he had. I'm not even gonna comment on that, but he looked down on me from his higher balcony, which was smaller. It was a smaller room, but his higher balcony, and he said, "You're so obnoxious," because he was like, "Oh my god, you're so obnoxious." It's just like how ironic, how ironic, but yeah, like you're offended. I don't know. I don't know. I think the smell of marijuana smells much better than the smell of cigarettes. And I could have been smoking a big ass cigar on that balcony, and that would have been way more offensive, I think. But I guess people are entitled to their own opinions. So yeah, these are the spots. Pay attention closely. They're you get stuck doing community service and paying fines uh, for violating this. So he's like, even though we see in New York everybody smoking everywhere, and most likely the stigma is a little bit less now, especially because it's legalized and people don't understand the law. But these are the places that you're not allowed to smoke. So if you ever have police interactions, just know where you sit. And definitely consult an attorney. I recommend not incriminating yourself. So get an attorney involved early on if you have to, even if it's by phone. All right, where are we going? So one of the other things is, what about if you're walking on the street and you smell like marijuana? They're saying that no, even the smell of burnt or suspicion of possession or anything like that, um, even money next to it, any of that stuff, that's not probable cause to stop somebody and search somebody. So even like, I don't know, I feel like if you are carrying a big huge bag that's just leaking out marijuana, that's a different story, because that you might be under suspicion of possessing more than the legal amount. But if it's just enough that fits in your pockets, then you're probably not anywhere near it. 'Cause 3 ounces takes up a big amount of space. Da, da, da. That was the question that they had. I didn't want to go into those because that's their presentation. Um, so yeah, there's some protections out there, and it depends on your employer. If you're certain federal, city, or whatever, this doesn't apply to you, but there's certain restrictions on saying, oh well, if you have cannabis in your system or whatever it is, they can't use that as a bar. But that doesn't mean so they can't like refuse to hire. They can't terminate you from employment, or discriminate you against you. And there's grounds to sue. Um, but yeah, because of federal, and there's other like law enforcement or security positions or things like that. They're still allowed to discriminate based on cannabis, even if it's legal. And then during work hours, they can fire you for that. Like if because you're not supposed to be smoking in the workplace, And so, does that mean you can go out on your lunch break and go smoke a joint? Well, if you come back high and they can, articulate the way that you're high and all that, they could use that as a basis to possibly discipline you, or do some fire you or something like that. So um, definitely be careful with that. Some people can tell when you're high, but is it interfering with your work? I don't know. I think it depends. I think you could get super stoned. There's levels to it. Like if you eat, too much edibles, you might not be able to function at all. Versus, if you uh, take a bong hit or a bong rip of a nice sativa, or some concentrates, concentrate pen. You take a couple hits, it might balance you out. But I don't know. I think there needs to be a lot more research done. But hopefully, legalization is on the way, and then the research can get done without people worrying about breaking the law. So child custody and visitation. So in the beginning, when before they had this law, they had the medical marijuana law, and under that they also have the same protections. So um, I've done some family cases, and there's some cases where it's drug involvement, drug testing, and all that is involved, and a lot of people have no problem quitting other drugs, but marijuana is something that they use as their crutch, or I don't know, they're just not willing to give it up. Um, and now it's like, oh well, make sure you get a doctor's note, and you know get approved for medical marijuana, because then they can't use that against you in these proceedings. If they drug test you and it comes up only marijuana, then you're good. But other drugs, you're still dealing with a situation. Um, but it's funny because marijuana is the last, pretty much, I don't know, probably one of the longest lasting things in your system that comes up in drug testing. Because I think some of the other drugs, it's only a few days that they last in your system. So uh, it's definitely been a big barrier for people that use marijuana. So I'm very thankful for the medical marijuana laws, and now I'm very thankful that states are definitely moving towards legalization for people over 21. I know the Republicans have been jumping up and down about that age and saying it should be 25 because people's brains are still developing. But are we, doing the alcohol at the age of 25? People's brains are developing. Isn't that the same excuse? I don't know. Which, oh, look at that. Probation, parole, other state supervision cannot be prohibited from cannabis use without clear and convincing evidence it is reasonably related to the underlying offense. So if you're stealing to buy cannabis, or you're stealing cannabis, you you may be prohibited, or something that's they're saying your substance abuse is the cause, driving while impaired or something like that. They may be able to restrict you, but if it's completely unrelated, like you're a white collar criminal or something else, probably not gonna get you on that. So yeah, they had came up with this chart. I thought this was pretty cool. So if you are under 21 and you get caught with some marijuana, there's a $50 penalty, and you have to do drug education. I'm seeing that everywhere for young people. They're trying to do drug education for people, which I wonder where the grants are and whatnot. Who's going to be running those drug education programs, and what kind of content is going to be in them? That should be interesting. Uh, Now, if you have more than 3 ounces or 24 grams of concentrated cannabis, you could face a fine of up to $125. It's a misdemeanor for more than 16 ounces. So you can basically have about 15 ounces and just pay a fine of $125, or less than 5 ounces of concentrated cannabis. But be careful. I definitely heard a police officer say that they were going to wet marijuana or put water on the marijuana to make it overweigh, which I thought was a very grimy thing. Um, so, be careful out there, people. But I don't even know if that would fly. I don't know if that was just an empty threat. But, yeah. More than 16 ounces. Misdemeanor. More than 5 pounds. Misdemeanors you can do, yeah, a year or 2 years in jail for a misdemeanor. So that's pretty serious. More than 5 pounds of cannabis or 2 pounds of concentrated cannabis is a Class E felony. More than 10 pounds, Class D felony, 4 pounds. So, what numbers are you willing to do? Because you're talking about 5, 10, 15 years, especially if you have other felonies. So look at this. You're still criminalizing cannabis. Uh, but I guess that's to prevent unlicensed sale and to better regulate. So let's see. Oh, automatic expungement. I think this is important. Um, Definitely don't have to do anything they're saying, but you can file a petition and be proactive. I think they were saying that it may not speed it up or anything like that. So, but they're working on this, and I would definitely still consult an attorney if you have a past conviction that's still popping up on your record. And like they said, they give out, they help you get your free report, and that's helpful, especially if you're applying for any kind of licensing or anything like that. You can see what exactly is being reported up to the highest level, even to the federal government, with regard to your criminal record, and you can use that. So if it doesn't show up there, it's probably not in your record, and you don't have to report it. Well, depending on the application, but speak to an attorney about that. Um, so these are the agencies that uh, are to be notified, and like a correctional facility that. Uh, so if they're holding you for that, you should be released immediately, or there's some kind of penalty. You should be changing that. Um, so that's good. It can't be used for housing, student loans, or job. Um, Still, non-citizens consult an attorney. Maybe a different effect. So there might be a chance to reduce your felony. So you saw the new scale of a felony. So let's say if you were just caught with 5 pounds of marijuana, maybe that's not uh, the level felony. Maybe that was a higher level felony before, and now it's a lesser felony, and you might be able to get that reduced, which might lead to reduction in your time, or other things. So, or like a resentencing, exactly. And maybe they're not even going to do jail time for that kind of a thing anymore. Um, so, if you have a loved one that's dealing, or that's in jail, or still dealing with probation or any kind of consequence related to a marijuana conviction, then you should be reaching out to an attorney and consulting an attorney, seeing if there's a way to get their record expunged, or if they have to do anything to do that, or to get that reduced. So if they can reduce it, maybe that reduction would render them eligible for sealing or something else. So you may definitely need to talk to an attorney about that. And if you're in New York, the Legal Action Center, I think, is doing that for free. So definitely get on that. So you're not allowed to sell, knowingly and unlawfully selling cannabis there's a fine of up to $250. Selling more than 3 ounces of cannabis is a misdemeanor. Um, so you can sell, basically what they're saying here. I'm guesstimating, the under the 3 ounces and under the 24 grams, and just put that fine into your pricing. I'm not recommending that. Don't do anything unlawful. Uh, but that, I feel like that's the structure they've built there, because now you're saying, all right, well, if I'm selling under 3 ounces or under 24 grams of concentrate, all I gotta do is mark in a $250 fine. There may be, so sometimes there are provisions, and I don't know, I haven't read this law close enough, but if you keep racking up these fines, it might eventually lead to a misdemeanor. So be careful with that. Plus, you gotta think about it. If they're estimating that you're selling 2 or 3 ounces every time you visit somebody, then they might be able to build a case saying that you're selling more than 3 ounces uh, overall. So watch out for that too. Um, Something to think about. Uh, I think if you're nickel and diamond, which I think they don't really care about that. But who knows? I think it's all neighborhood specific. It's all very police specific, as far as who's enforcing and how they're doing it. So we'll look out for that. But these are the restrictions on sales. You can read that yourself. Um, so I didn't want to go into the licensing stuff, but there will be certain types of authorized licenses. I think that's for another video where we talk about businesses and things like that. But eventually, people will be able to plant and cultivate, 3 mature plants and 3 immature plants in your house or in your home. But it could be no more than 6 mature and no more than 6 immature plants at a time, and that's because you have 2 people in the house or more. Then you can have up to that. I wonder how that works if it's subdivided or things like that. I wonder how that you know. I'm guessing that you would be allowed to if it's not, like if it's a multi-residence home, multi-family home. But I don't know. That's going to be interesting to find out. Uh, I'm guessing it would be allowed, but don't take me up on that. Consult an attorney. Uh, so you can have up to 5 pounds in your house. So that's reasonable, I guess. I don't think I need more than 5 pounds. Um, but if I have 8 plants, and if you do it right, you can grow about 8 pounds. So I feel like that's a little contra. Oh wait, no, it says 6. So well, 6. If you have 6 mature plants, and if you do the grow right, you can grow a pound per plant, and sometimes people do more. So that's 6 pounds right there, or at least over 5 pounds. So that's something I think is a little contradictory. So you gotta be careful with that. Um, so your landlord could still say, "Oh no, you can't use my water that way," or whatever it is. But they're not. You're not allowed to do it until they have the first retail sale, which I don't think they're close to just yet. But I'm sure you'll see news about that if that happens. But they're supposed to do within 18 months of the first retail sale. You're supposed to be allowed to start growing. So that's pretty cool. So here goes your summary. Like I said, check out the Legal Action Center video. I'll definitely put a link out, or do a search Legal Action Center on YouTube. I saw the video, so definitely recommend watching the whole thing. They're pretty thorough with it, and they have like little hypos that are pretty cool. So, and if you're dealing with any of those issues and you're in New York, you may want to contact them, and it might be a good starting point. Um, and they have this whole clean slate New York, and I think that's something that you may want to look into and see if you could donate and help and support. Um, That said, I hope you enjoyed this video. As I always say, trust no one. Be safe out there, people.